Great to see you. Sermon's already been preached, but I'll give you some bonus material this morning. If you're new with us, we're going through a series of messages where we're just going verse by verse through the Gospel of Mark together and seeing what the Lord has for us as a congregation. And it's amazing how he's met us exactly where we need to be met each and every week, and I trust that he'll do the same with your heart today. You know, there's just something about sharing a meal with somebody. When you look at over the pages of Scripture, Jesus does most of his ministry over meals, most of the big kingdom work. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of the work that he's done in your life has come around a table as well, or across the table from someone sharing a cup of coffee, a cup of water, or a glass of wine together. I was just reminded of the significant things that happened around the table this week when we were doing an Advent devotional, and everything was going great. We're getting a jump on it right. We're really, getting our hearts and our minds set. And then our 8-year-old daughter says, "What is a virgin?" One of those moments when you have to have the talk right at the table is great. It's great, right? One of those moments that'll be significant and was significant in the history and life of our church. Now, some of you guys are going to have that conversation over lunch today. Sorry about that. Just one of those moments when it hits you, you're like, oh, wow, kids are in service today. Okay, I got it. Okay, it's good. So anyway, what I'm getting at here before I totally bust that illustration is that one of the metaphors of the Christian life that we see from the Scriptures is this idea of a cup. This idea that each and every one of us have a cup that the Lord has entrusted to us, and that Jesus has a cup that he endured for us. And the Bible talks about the cup as a container of sorts that holds the calling of God for our lives. We see in the Bible cups of overflowing blessing, cups of curses and wrath, cups of sorrow and joy, cups of abundance and provision. The late priest Henry Nouwen pastored and led in many places throughout his life, but at the end of his career, he was a priest among a group of adults with intellectual disabilities at L'Arche Daybreak Community in Ontario, Canada. Leading at Daybreak completely changed the way and kind of the frame that he wrote from because of the context that he was in. And one of the books that he wrote while I was there is called Can You Drink This Cup? And I want to read a couple of my favorite quotes from that book to kind of set the stage for us today. Here's what Nouwen said. He says, "We have to live our life, not someone else's life. We have to hold our own cup. We have to dare to say, this is my life, the life that is given to me, and it is this life that I have to live as well as I can. My life is unique. Nobody else will ever live it. Drinking the cup that Jesus drank is living a life in and with the Spirit of Jesus, which is the Spirit of unconditional love. Jesus took upon himself all this suffering and lifted it upon the cross, not as a curse, but as a blessing. Jesus made the cup of God's wrath into a cup of blessing. That's the mystery of the Eucharist. Jesus died for us so that we may live. He poured out his blood for us that we may find new life. He gave himself away for us that we can live in community. He became for us food and drink so that we could be fed for everlasting life. That is what Jesus meant when he took the cup and said, this is the cup of the new covenant in my blood poured out for you. Drinking the cup of life is, through Christ, fully appropriating and internalizing our own unique existence with all of its sorrows and joys. So for us, the cup is a measure of the call of God on each of our own lives. It's unique for each of us. None of us choose our cup. It's given to us as a gift, and it's filled with sorrow and joy, but it is the calling of God on your life. And today I want to lean into that reality. The cup that we live out of is much different because we belong to Jesus. No matter what's in it. We, in essence, live out of his cup as we face our own cups of joy and adversity. And so what I want to look at today, if you're a note taker, you can get the app and follow along with me, or you can just take notes, is we're going to look at 2 points. One, what is the cup that Jesus drank? What did he come to do? What is the life that the Lord lived for us? And 2, how do we drink from that same cup? How do we live our own unique lives out of the life that he has given for us? So drinking from the cup of Jesus as we face our own cups has a certain posture that we will see. James and John kind of hit at the edges of it in Mark 10, but they really don't get the essence of it. And that idea is this, it's the posture of servant leadership. And that's our big idea for today. Servant leadership is the lifestyle of humility that flows from the ransom of Jesus. And what I mean by that is that Jesus is not asking you to do something that he's not already done for you. I think a lot of times when serving, when giving our lives, giving up ourselves for the sake of others, when it seems burdensome to us, it's because we're doing it out of our own strength. But when we realize that he's already done all the work for us and we're hooked into the promises of God, it is a blessing, not a burden, to live with that kind of a posture. So let's dig in, and we're going to see that theme kind of threaded throughout the whole sermon today. So what is the cup that Jesus drank? If you've got your Bible, let's go back to Mark chapter 10 and look at verse 32. So Jesus is on a journey, and he's going up to Jerusalem. And in the book of Mark, in the Gospel of Mark, it's this trajectory that leads up toward Jerusalem where he will endure the cross for us, where he will receive his own cup from God, from the Father for us. And he's been telling the disciples about it for weeks and months. And the reason he's been telling them about it is because he wants them to have confidence when it happens, right? Whenever they remember, oh, Jesus said all of this was going to happen. I can trust that he's going to come through. So in this instance right here, he is super explicit. So I want to read that for us real quick. Verse 32 says this: they were on the road, they were going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were all amazed. Those who followed him were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, see, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the priests and the scribes. And they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. So everybody's going to abandon him. Doesn't matter if you're a Gentile or you're a priest or you're a scribe. And then all of those people together will mock him and spit on him. And they will flog him and they will kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise. And then verse 45 is what I love. It's kind of the thrust of the whole text today. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus lays it all out for the disciples. He says, hey, my whole life is about dying and rising so that you won't have to fear dying and you too will get to live. This is why he talks about why he has to die. And what I've noticed about this is that there's kind of a certain shape to Jesus' life that our lives follow. Paul Miller is a pastor and author. He wrote this book called J-Curve, and it's really about, the whole theme of the book is this. It's dying and rising with Jesus in everyday life. So I've kind of used that as a format to kind of give us some imagery about what Jesus' life was like and then how our life reflects that. So here's the cup of ransom that Jesus drank right here. So we see in this text, Mark 10, 32 through 42 here, that Jesus was delivered over to the people that he should have trusted, right? That kind of freaks the disciples out. He wants them to know that it's all part of the plan. And then those people, whether they're Jews or Gentiles, all mock, spit on him, and flog him. They do the most terrible things to him. The most terrible things humanly, thinkable to Jesus. Then they hang him on a Roman cross, which the scripture said that cursed is anyone who's hung on a cross. So he becomes a curse for those that he loves. And he's killed. And then we see that he will rise in 3 days. He tells his disciples all of this before it happens. But this key word that we got to unpack here is this word ransom. I've never ransomed anybody before. I don't know if you have, but I had to really think through it. What does it mean that Jesus was a ransom for us? Well, I think the components of ransom are a couple here that we need to look at. The first one is this, is that you actually have to owe a debt to somebody to have to pay a ransom, right? You have to owe a debt to somebody to have to pay a ransom. And ransom means this, it's to pay the price to redeem and free those that are enslaved because of their guilt. So someone's been found guilty because of something, and there's a ransom on their life that has to purchase them out of bondage. Now, the scriptures teach us that each and every person on the face of the planet are in bondage to sin. And there is no amount of good works, there's no amount of things that we can give, no amount of money we can give to buy our own ransom. There's nothing we can do. This is the whole reason that the Father gives Jesus the cup of ransom. And what does that ransom payment include? Well, it includes a substitutionary sacrifice. Here's the thing about Jesus. Jesus was not representing himself on that cross. He was representing me and you on that cross. We look at it from Jesus' life, we're like, man, he was perfect, like literally perfect. And we think it's unjust that he be delivered over to the people that he should have trusted. It's unjust that he be flogged and spat upon and persecuted. It's unjust that he be condemned and sentenced to death just because of his treason of claiming to be the king of Israel. It's all unjust and undeserving. And you can say that all day long unless you realize that he paid your ransom payment. And because he paid your ransom payment, he's the most sinful person that's ever walked the face of the planet. That's the beauty of the gospel. The cup of Jesus is the cup of God's, and dare I say it, most holy wrath against sin. It's full of wrath, and he put all of the wrath that he would ever have against sinners who betray and deny him in that cup. And he didn't hold anything back from his son on that day. Nothing, no amount of his displeasure against sin. And Jesus, on that day, had to hang on the cross in my place and in your place. And why? Because we are that far from God. Atonement's another piece of this. What does that mean? How do we become one with God again? And it has two parts, really. The first one is this. It's about cleansing our hearts. So, okay, we're forgiven, but my heart still feels dirty, right? I don't know if anybody else experiences that. Well, part of what Jesus' substitutionary sacrifice does in our place is it cleanses our hearts like a big sponge that removes a stain from the carpet. He cleanses our hearts from sin through his work, and he turns the Father's wrath away toward himself. He is now the object of wrath instead of us. And it's not because God doesn't love us, it's because we've disobeyed him that much. And now because of what Jesus has done, we get to live in the full pleasure of God. That he looks at us. He can't see the sin that you can't forget because of the cross. He said that I've cast their sin as far as the east is from the west. That is what is true of the child of God. But first he had to pay the ransom. There's this book, and it turned into a movie too, called The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And the 14th chapter of the book is this picture. It's not a perfect metaphor. It breaks down a little bit, but it gives us the most clear picture of what Jesus would have to do for guilty sinners. So check out this clip.
Here, Edmund!
Whoa, horsey!
My name is Philip.
Oh, sorry.
The witch has demanded a meeting with Aslan. She's on her way here.
Queen of Narnia! Empress of Moon Island!
You belong here.
You have a traitor in your midst, Aslan.
His offense was not against you.
Have you forgotten the laws upon which Narnia was built?
Do not cite the deep magic to me, witch. I was there when it was written.
Then you'll remember well that every traitor belongs to me. His blood is my property.
Try and take him then.
Do you really think that mere force will deny me my right? Little king. Aslan knows that unless I have blood as the law demands, all of Narnia will be overturned and perish in fire and water. That boy will die on the stone table. As is tradition. You dare not refuse me.
Enough. I shall talk with you alone. She has renounced her claim on the son of Adam's blood.
How do I know your promise will be kept?
Yeah, as that clip kind of ends, and if you've read those books before or watched that movie, you know that the despondency that's in Aslan's face is because he's getting ready to go to the stone table, right? And he's going to go and he's going to pay the ransom to redeem Peter. And that's a picture of what the ransom of Jesus is for you and for me. Let me remind you of Matthew 26. Jesus says, "My soul is very sorrowful even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little farther, he fell on his face and he prayed, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. But not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "Couldn't you watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he says, "The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak." And then he goes away and he prays again. And he says, "Father, if this cannot pass, if there's not another way, your will be done." You see that, and you know, and I know that cup did not pass, that he had to drink that cup, and he had to drink that cup all the way to the bottom for any of us to have any hope. 2 Corinthians 5 says it like this: "For our sake, he made him," Jesus, the Father made Jesus, "to be sin," to be the definition of sin, who knew no sin, so that we might become the righteousness of Christ. If we actually believe the Bible, Jesus is the worst sinner that ever walked the face of the planet because he took all of our sin and he became that. He didn't just look at it. He didn't just hear about it. He became it for you, church. And so if he became sin, what does it look like for you to walk in righteousness now? You see, so much of our lives, we hang on to the sin that we commit instead of repenting of it and turning from it and receiving the righteous life that he's given to us. Yes, we are sinners, but yes, we are righteous. All of the righteous deeds that Jesus ever did have been imputed to you through faith. You couldn't be more righteous. That's how the Father sees you. But instead of this, oftentimes we live kind of like an orphaned salvation, right? We live as someone who says that they're a child of God, but never receives the benefits of truly belonging. And I want to encourage you today to lean into the love, to the Father, to the ransom that he's paid for you, because out of that flows the life of obedience. You can never do enough to please God. Because God is already pleased with you, you can live a life that's pleasing, an aroma to him. I love what Tim Keller says in his book, King's Cross, which is about the book of Mark. He says this. He says, "God created the world in an instant, and he recreated the world on the cross." Love that really changes and redeems things is always a substitutionary sacrifice. The cross was something that was done just for you. In that garden, your face was on the mind of Christ. Your eternal security was his top priority. And I don't know about you, but I don't think about that enough. I don't sit in that enough. I don't let that comfort me enough. And it's from that place of security, of being fully known and fully loved by God, that we are called to live our lives. His cup is what gives us the courage to face the cup that we are dealt in this life, right? So let's look at that. Can we drink that cup? James and John say, hey, we can. And what we see is that none of us could drink the cup of wrath that Jesus drank. He could drink it. But because of what he's done, we can face what tomorrow holds for us. So what we're going to see in this next couple of verses here is that is that there's kind of two different approaches to facing that cup, right? There's the cup of escape and there's the cup of embrace. And we've said that Jesus' life kind of has a shape to it. There's a suffering that he enters into for us before the resurrection comes, before the relief comes. In our lives, we are called to share in the sufferings of Christ. So if you're a Christian, and you came to faith in Jesus, probably the first thing that happened in your Christian walk is that you got surprised because life got harder. Anybody? Right? It happens, right? Because that's how he conforms you to the image of Jesus. You can't be like Jesus if you don't suffer. That's how we're made more like him. So let's look at Mark 10:35 here, this interaction he has with two of his disciples, the sons of thunder, if you will, James and John. They came up to him and they said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. We want you to be a genie and in a bottle here." I'm kind of joking here. But he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in glory." So they came up. Jesus has just told them about his J-curve, kind of the shape of his life, what it's going to look like for him to redeem their lives, his cup of suffering. And they basically say to them, "Hey, Jesus, all of that death and suffering stuff, like that's really great for you, right? That's really great for you. But can we just fast forward to the end of the story where the good stuff comes? Can we just get past all of that death and all of that suffering and get to glory? Oh, and by the way, when we get to the end of the story, you can be king, that's cool. But in your kingdom cabinet, can I be the prime minister and he be the chief of staff, you know? Can you elevate us in glory to make sure that we've got the best places? Now, the thing that James and John are doing is they're thinking that Jesus, that they're to be served if they're going to be great in the kingdom. And Jesus is turning that upside down. He's saying, listen, if you're going to be like me, you've come to serve and give your life as a ransom, right? I've come to do that for you. Your life is going to take that shape. You're now living sacrifices, is what Romans 12:2 says. And that is how we live a life that's pleasing to God. So when we first engage in an interaction or a conversation, we're thinking when we're at our best, how can I serve this person? How can I share the love of God through my words and my actions and my time? Not how can this person serve me? But James and John, it's not quite clicking yet for them. So I've kind of framed this. This is kind of the cup of escape, right? And so these guys, if you got the graphic up here, here's what they do. And I do this all the time, okay, right? And so you're presented with something that's hard. You're like, ooh, it's scary down there. I don't want to go down there, right? Anybody else? But Jesus, you can go down there and maybe I can just kind of take the shortcut across because I kind of see where you're going now. Maybe I can meet you up there, right? And I think we do that a lot of times. And we do that with the kind of with the mentality that it's better for us not to suffer. It's better for pain not to be in our lives. And the scriptures say that we're made like him in his suffering. That the cross is not something that's just done for you, it's something that's done to you, right? Galatians 2, been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who lives, but he who lives me. And the life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who gave himself up for me. That's the shape of the Christian life. And so my question for you today is this. Where is it that you want to take that shortcut right now? Where is it that you're like, okay, Jesus, I see where you're going. I'll just meet you at the top, right? And what is it going to cost you if you take that route? What is it going to cost you? Maybe you're avoiding something, a difficult conversation. You know that it's going to be painful. You know that reconciliation involves truth. It involves confessing pain. It involves confronting things. And you just don't want to do it. Maybe the Lord is inviting you today to go down there and find that he's there with you. Maybe you've got kind of a relational conflict with somebody deep with you. Maybe you're even contemplating, separating, getting a divorce because things are so dark down there. What would it look like to see Jesus at the bottom with you? Maybe you're contemplating taking a shortcut in some other ethical area in your life, whether it's a business dealing or some other kind of thing that's kind of surfaced in your life. Wherever it is, the promise of the shortcut that doesn't involve the suffering and the pain and the darkness is not going to give you or make you who you are created to be, friends. Because we are made like him in the suffering. We're made like him in the pain. And the beauty is this, is that Jesus is with you in the hard stuff because he's already paid the whole price for your redemption. He front-loaded the payment for your life. And because of that, we are free to worship him even at the bottom of the curve, because the resurrection for you is not just a possibility, but a certainty. And you live differently when you know the end of the story, don't you? But I don't know about you, I forget about the end of the story so many days of my life. This next story is kind of seemingly unrelated, but I think it's significant because Jesus asked Bartimaeus the exact same question that he asked James and John. And this is the last encounter that Jesus has with someone before he makes his triumphal entry into Jerusalem and lives his last life, or his last week of life on this earth. And he asked this question to Bartimaeus: what do you want me to do for you? And Bartimaeus' answer is kind of different. So here's what Mark 10:46 through 52 says. They came to Jericho, and he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd. And Bartimaeus, this blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, he was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and to say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And the people around him began to rebuke him, and they were like, hey, be quiet. Don't bother Jesus, right? And Jesus hears him again say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stops, and he tells his disciples, hey, call him. Bring him over here to me. Elevate him. Bring him to me. Let me see this man who's calling out my name. And the blind man, and Jesus asked him that question, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man says this, Rabbi, please let me recover my sight. I've been blind probably my whole life. I've been a beggar probably my whole life. And Jesus says, go your way. Your faith has made you well. And immediately he recovered his sight. And here's the key part. He followed him on the way. Because why is that key? Because where was Jesus going? To the cross. Here's the significant thing about Bartimaeus' journey, how he embraces the cup that he's dealt. So he's a blind beggar, we've said that. He pleads to Jesus in a unique way. He does it differently than James and John, doesn't he? He pleads to the identity of Jesus, a merciful God, right? We see that all over the Old Testament, that God is a God of mercy, right? Not only does he give us what we don't deserve, he doesn't give us what we do deserve. Bartimaeus, in essence, is saying, hey, I deserve this. I'm not coming to you saying I'm worth saving, but because of your mercy, I'm going to appeal to that part of your heart, Jesus. Not because I deserve it. You see, because here's the thing about Bartimaeus, he already knows what it's like to be at the bottom. He's been there his whole life. And Jesus is drawn to those who knows what it's like to be at the bottom. And so Jesus lifts him up, and he physically heals him, yes, but he also spiritually heals him. And why do we know that? Because he's willing to follow Jesus to the bottom of his life as well, right? It's a beautiful invitation for us, because the disciples kind of try to shield Jesus away from this problem child, right? And Jesus says he gets it more than you. He gets it. He gets it that he's not here to be served, but to serve. He gets that part of the call. And so Jesus, goes to the cross. Bartimaeus follows him. We don't know how long Bartimaeus follows him. We don't know how far. But what we do know is this. The essence that we get is this, is that Bartimaeus is essentially saying, I'm going with you as far and as deep and as long as you will let me follow you. And that is what Jesus is wanting from us. He's wanting from us to see that he's with us, and because of that, we can face the cup that we're dealt in this life. You see, when you realize that there is no resurrection without death, you're not afraid to follow Jesus to the bottom of whatever cup is in front of you. Because it's there and there only that we experience Jesus the most deeply. We all have a cup in this life. With some, it's a cup of apparent external blessing. People look at your life, you look so put together, right? But inside, you're like this testimony of this young man in the first service. He said, my heart was just full of darkness. I just believed the worst things about myself. That's some of you in this room. And on the outside, you look put together. Jesus wants to meet you at the bottom of that. With others, it's a cup of sickness and pain and hardship. You just can't seem to get ahead. Jesus wants to meet you at the bottom of that as well. We all drink a cup of suffering in this life, and for many of us, it's different. The only difference is this: for those of us who are in Jesus, you never drink it alone, and you never drink it first. We drink out of the overflow of his love, and it leads us to live our lives differently. I'll close with Psalm 23. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, because your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And then it goes on to say this in verse 5. You prepare a table, a feast, an invitation in the presence of my enemies. So the language looks like this. There are all these enemies around this field. I'm in this green field. I'm an open target for the enemy. But yet I feast in the middle of it. Why? Because the good shepherd's with me. And he says, you anoint my head with oil, with blessing. And because of that, there's our word, my cup overflows. That the abundance of who you are fills me up to face whatever life deals me. And because of this, because my cup is overflowing because of your cup, goodness and mercy follow me like a shadow. And all the days of my life, I get to dwell in the house of the Lord forever, no matter what the cup looks like. Amen? That's the good news of the gospel. That you can't shake his mercy and you can't shake his goodness because you are shielded in Christ. You are hidden in Jesus. All of the wrath against sin, all of the things that we've earned, whether we want to believe that or not, Jesus has already paid for it. He drank the cup to the bottom because he loves you so much. I pray that you would believe that this morning. Hey, Pastor Ryan here. We're so glad that you've tuned in with us and watched one of our online sermons. Our vision as a church is to live as the family of God, together proclaiming and demonstrating the gospel of grace to one another in our city. If you don't have a church home or you're looking for a church, we'd invite you to attend one of our in-person worship gatherings so you can experience all that God has for us as a community of believers on mission.